Welcome to a Community Partners interview where we explore the organizations, opportunities, and resources that look to make change in our daily lives. I'm your host, Sean Pickard, and you're listening to Voices for Ability Radio. All abilities, all the time. Today, I'm joined by Laura Dixon, president of the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance. The Canadian Epilepsy Alliance is a Canada-wide network of grassroots organizations dedicated to the promotion of independence and quality of life for people with epilepsy and their families through support services, information, advocacy, and public awareness. Laura, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I'm great, Sean. Thanks for the invitation to join you today.
We're going to start here. Let's learn a little bit about you. Laura, tell us about the Laura Dixon experience. How did you get to the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance, and why work with individuals with epilepsy?
Well, thanks for that question. The members of the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance all have day jobs as executive directors of their own local epilepsy association. So I work out of the Epilepsy Association of Calgary office, where we are serving the estimated 30,000 people in southern Alberta living with a diagnosis of epilepsy. You did a great job introducing what the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance does. So for the past 4 years, I have been a member of the board of directors and have served in the role of vice president at the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance. And just at this past spring AGM, I was elected president to a term of the next 2 years. And why serve people with epilepsy? I think that there are a lot of hidden struggles out there, and there is a need for a community-based response to help support and fill in the knowledge gaps of people that are diagnosed with epilepsy. Often people feel stigmatized and isolated, and having a service to connect with in the community makes a huge difference in people's lives.
Oh, absolutely. That community being there can make such a difference. But I'd like to touch base on something. You mentioned some numbers here. I believe it was 30,000 individuals in southern Alberta. But what about Canada?
So the prevalence rate of epilepsy is measured differently from province to province. But what we do say is that it exists in about 1% of the population. And so in some places, the prevalence may be a little higher. We think that may be because people tend to migrate to centers that have better services and programs for people with epilepsy. And so you will hear a lot of different numbers out there from place to place. The 1% also needs a little bit of context around it as well. Really, anybody can be diagnosed with epilepsy at any time during their lives. And 60% of those who are living with a diagnosis of epilepsy have no known underlying cause. And so it's difficult really to get a handle around true numbers, but those are kind of the statistics that we are working with here in Canada.
Yes, isn't it wonderful, the little system we have here to kind of keep those numbers in place, right? Now, you've mentioned that epilepsy, anyone can be diagnosed with it at any time in their life, and there's no real known cause for it. But let's talk a little bit about what epilepsy is. What are the symptoms, things of that nature? Is there a cure for it?
Well, at this point in time, there is no known cure for epilepsy. Some people are diagnosed with epilepsy as children and are said to grow out of it. Those are particular types of epilepsy. They have specific sort of scientific and medical diagnosis terms to them. But there is no known cure, and 30% of those who are living with epilepsy actually live with something that's called a drug-resistant form of epilepsy, and they do not experience relief from any of the drug treatments that are available to them. And so that's when something like surgery can become an option to try and control seizures. Epilepsy can look very different across a number of different types. It can be anything from sort of repetitive movements, blinking of the eyes, twitching of fingers and toes, tapping, smacking of lips. That's one set of recognizable symptoms of one type of seizure. And then there's the generalized tonic-clonic that I think a lot of people sort of think of when they think of epilepsy, which is where a person sort of falls to the ground and has a tonic-clonic seizure with sort of shaking of the limbs and can be quite frightening for people to watch. And so I think that's one of the really important things that we do as community-based associations is to try and provide some education so that people can recognize these signs and symptoms of seizures, learn how to respond, know when to call 911 and when it isn't a medical emergency, and just to support the person in their recovery. And also, in particular, how to support somebody who has just had a seizure while the brain sort of reorients itself and comes out of a very confused state. And that's where we sometimes see some very unfortunate interactions with law enforcement or other bystanders who simply just don't know how to recognize somebody who is in what is called the postictal state, just of confusion.
So basically what we've been told through Hollywood and TV, things like that, where the individual is shaking, the limbs flailing, and they're on the ground, that's not the only way it happens. From what I understand here, you can actually have someone that looks like they're just kind of rocking in their chair, twitching a little bit, even of just a hand.
Yeah,
That can actually be a seizure.
Yeah, you have that correct, Sean. And one of the other things that I actually neglected to mention in that description too is sometimes it can just be somebody who seems to lose sort of awareness in the current moment. So it can almost look like daydreaming. And this is something that is important for teachers to recognize in the classroom, for example, because during that time of that sort of momentary loss of awareness, a person is not taking in the content in the classroom anymore. And that person needs to get properly diagnosed and supported so that they can continue to be successful in the classroom.
That's actually a huge thing, to be able to be successful in a classroom or the workplace for that matter.
Exactly.
That kind of leads me into, how do we identify some of those things? So you talked a little bit about some of the symptoms. So someone twitching, things like that. Let's move over to the myths and misconceptions surrounding epilepsy. For either the teacher or the HR professional out there, what are some of those myths and misconceptions?
Well, I think, first of all, people may have some misconception that people have some sort of reduced cognitive ability or a mental health issue when it comes to epilepsy. In fact, it's a neurological disease. It can come with some limitations. And, I think with proper support, people can explore the best educational and career options that are open to them. And with the support of classroom educators and HR or managers in the workplace, people can be very successful. Now, unfortunately, because it is a disease that holds so much stigma, a lot of times people don't want to talk about it or self-identify. And, I completely respect that. And that is totally up to an individual around whether to disclose a health issue. But there are certainly accommodations that can be made for people. For example, some people experience an onset of seizures as the brain goes from sleep to wake. So in the morning when they're waking up, and that could just simply be addressed by alternative working hours or a little bit of an adjustment to working hours so that the person is healthy and symptom free when they show up at work. Other accommodations we've seen, some side effects of medications, seizures themselves, or some of the causes of seizures that can affect memory. And so we do have some programming at our associations to equip people with some tools to be able to improve their memory and cognition skills to be better equipped to succeed in the classroom and the workplace. And a simple example of that might be, maintaining a journal, keeping track of the ways in which you're taking care of yourself, the things that you need to do, the deadlines, the appointments you need to get to just give yourself a sense of routine in both lifestyle and also in the commitments that might be expected of you in a workplace.
Now, this is the first time I've actually heard about cognitive issues or memory being a factor with epilepsy. Is that something that's been dusted under the rug for a long time?
Well, I'm not sure if it has been dusted under the rug or not, but there is a specific program that's been designed. It's called Hopscotch, and various associations across Canada and the United States do offer this 8-week one-on-one session to support people with memory and cognition. Some people will in our network will tell us that they've lost a few jobs. They don't know why they've been fired. They haven't been given a reason, just not a good fit, something like that. And so part of it could be that better supports around memory and being able to keep track of things could be a factor in why they have or have not been successful.
You know what, Laura? It almost sounds like you're reading parts of my life here. That's all I can say. But let's actually take a moment and talk about the services and resources that are available to the individuals with epilepsy. What does the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance do to help or assist? And I'm sure that's going to be different. We all have our own journey through life. But overall, if you're talking about a common journey through the organization, what's out there for folks?
Well, the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance itself does not directly deliver services. We're there to advocate on behalf of people with epilepsy. So, if there are any committees that are put together at a government level that are looking for input into the design of policies and programs, we might send a member to sit on that kind of a committee. It is at the local level of the member associations that are part of the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance that the true magic happens. And so we will provide support group programming. I think the connection and being able to meet another person with epilepsy is really huge in the kinds of programming and services that we do. Just the relief out there when a parent of a child with epilepsy actually gets to meet another parent of a child with epilepsy and talk about the common challenges and fears that they have is really quite a magical moment in the support that we're able to put together. So I think the peer-based programming is one of the really key things. I mentioned the memory and cognition programming, so that's a bit more curriculum based. When people are newly diagnosed with epilepsy, we also offer registered programming to kind of take them through a number of things around how to care for themselves, how to advocate for themselves, how to talk to people about their diagnosis if that's something they want to do. Just really trying to relieve that stress in the moment of a new diagnosis is a really key thing that we do. And the other part of it is a lot of people with epilepsy also concurrently struggle with mental health just as a result of the stress of managing the disease, feelings of isolation, things that have had to change around their lifestyle, like maybe loss of being able to drive a car has threatened your independence, relationships in your life. And so we do offer programming to help people better take care of their own mental health and address any symptoms of depression and anxiety. So that's available, as well as educational outreach. As I mentioned earlier, we really want the general public to be able to identify and respond to seizures so that the people that we're supporting at the local level know that there are people out there who can understand and properly respond to a seizure if they happen to have one in a public place.
And that's very important, just to feel comfortable to be able to go out in public in a situation like that. Now, you've mentioned a couple of I'm going to use the term buzzwords here, things that catch people's attention. And I want to talk about things like the mental health aspect of things. Now, you also mentioned that the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance doesn't directly jump in with the individual, but they will help advocate, for example. So, now you mentioned you were out of Calgary. If you're looking to connect someone in BC or the East Coast, is it a magical list of phone numbers you have there? How does that work when you're trying to connect someone?
Well, this is a very good question, Sean. I'm glad you asked that. We actually do have a 1-800 number that people can call. And the way that that number works is that whatever area code the caller is calling from will get them in touch with the closest epilepsy association to them. And I'm going to give you that 1-800 number right now. It's 1-866 epilepsy. I know there's more than the required number of letters in epilepsy, but it will just once it dials in the number of letters or digits it needs in epilepsy, it'll connect you. So that's 1-866 epilepsy.
1-866 epilepsy can help you find information in your local neighborhood. Okay. What was that number again, Laura?
1-866 epilepsy.
Wonderful. Now, obviously, to operate an organization such as the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance, you need to have a little bit of funding. You got to be able to keep the lights turned on and the computers going. Let's talk about funding for the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance. Do you have any fundraisers coming up? Any events where people can help keep these keep that phone number going, for example?
Well, that's actually a great question. The most of the fundraising is done at the local level. So I would encourage people to connect with the Epilepsy Association in their region. If you're in the Maritimes, it's Epilepsy Maritimes. There are a number of Quebec agencies. You can find them all listed on the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance website, and that will take you to each of the local agencies. Generally, if there's any kind of fundraisers or events going on, they'll be there. During the month of March, which is Epilepsy Awareness Month in Canada, that is when the majority of fundraisers are taking place across Canada. You will find anything from galas to tea parties to fun runs and walks. Purple Day lightings are taking place in communities. Businesses are preparing special purple items like purple bakery treats and purple ice cream and that kind of thing. So I would say keep your eye on your local association during the month of March to figure out how to best support them. We have one initiative going on at the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance right now, which is to promote access through the Canadian Police Knowledge Network to make training on epilepsy, seizure recognition and response free to police officers from coast to coast to coast, so that the policing response, in the case of someone experiencing a seizure, is an appropriate one. So that fundraiser is up on the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance website itself.
You know what? I would like to add one word to what you're doing there, Laura, but this may just be me. Could we make that training free and mandatory for all officers? That might just be me, though.
We would love to see that, Sean. But we hope that the invitation to take part in it will inspire people to do so. But yes, we have thought the same thing.
Now, you talked a little bit about the back to work type of scenario that you have there, even the memory and getting ready for your own day. Now, I know you don't deal with individuals directly, but can you think of a time where you've heard of a success that somebody had when they actually got to their local Epilepsy Alliance and got some supports and resources in place? Can you tell me about a success story?
Sure, I can certainly tell you a success story, and these are the best stories to share, honestly. We had a young man, in his 20s, diagnosed with epilepsy. It was a diagnosis that he was not expecting at that time in his life. He had had a relatively healthy life up until then. Um, this threw him into a fairly significant spiral of depression and withdrawal from society. um, when he reached out to receive support from his local association, he was provided with some short-term crisis counseling to work through sort of the immediate concerns around his mental health. From there, he registered to take part in an 8-week program called Uplift, to meet with others in a group setting, safe setting, who are experiencing the same kinds of challenges related to not feeling up to going out anywhere, not wanting to go to work, losing sort of close, feeling like a loss of their close relationships in his life. After that, he was matched with a one-on-one peer mentor who was somebody a little bit further along in the journey of a diagnosis and disease management, somebody who was feeling a little bit more on top of things, has a career, has a family, that kind of thing. And the last that I've heard is that this person is out dating again. He's looking for work. He said without those kinds of supports, he felt like he would still be sitting alone in his basement.
That is awesome to hear. I love those stories, Laura. Now, this question here, I always have fun with this one. And we can expand this a little bit. It doesn't have to focus on epilepsy itself. It can just be the world of individuals with disabilities, or perfectly happy to keep it on epilepsy here. But what do you see happening to individuals with disabilities today that shouldn't be? And how do we stop it?
Well, I think that individuals with disabilities also can suffer the unfortunate fate of also living in deep poverty. And that can be from a number of factors. It can be because they have a number of diagnoses of different types of disabilities, the affordability of medication, the efficacy of medications and treatments, and the side effects that come along with that, and your ability to sort of show up and go out in the world, your ability to get around by accessing by transit, and whether you can get an accessible transit cost, like everything that you need to do to function really in society costs money. And I think that what the federal government has done in introducing new basic income for people with disabilities is a step in the right direction, because we really believe that having a disability should not also sentence somebody to a life of poverty.
That's a very important point right there. Just because you have a disability doesn't mean you should be living in poverty. Now, Laura, if people are looking to get more information from you, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, if you want to get a hold of me, you can email president at Canadian Epilepsy Alliance.org, and you can certainly reach me by email that way. I work out of the Calgary office myself, and so you can reach me at info@epilepsycalgary.com if you'd like to reach out. If you're here in Western Canada or in Calgary, love to connect. But those are the ways to get in touch with me.
Wonderful. And Laura, that's all the time we have for today. If you want to say goodbye to the listeners, Sarah.
Well, thank you all. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this chat with you today, Sean, and thank you to the listeners for tuning in.
And that's all the time we have for today, ladies and gentlemen. Please tune in to our next Community Partners interview, where we're going to be interviewing someone else. I'm Sean Pickard. Until next time, everybody, bye for now.